You know, normally I don't do anything like this to start the program, but I did want to talk to you just a little bit about preparedness. And I know you've all heard that about 1,000,000 different times in at least 500,000 different ways. But it's very important because people have told me, well, you guys are ready to go, right? You're going to come to my rescue. And the chief and I have talked about it. And as far as feeding people in Port Orchard, no, we're not going to come to your rescue. We don't have any food supplies. Depending on the emergency, if it's a big emergency, if it's road closures and bridges down and really hurt people somewhere, our police department's going to have their hands full going, prioritizing things from the very, very most important down. And if you're not hurt really bad, you may not get any help for quite a few hours, days, you know. So what I'm trying to do is just encourage people to know they can do things for themselves. And I just want to let you know the things I'm going to show you here cost less than $100, and it's a good start. It's not by any means a good program, but it's a good start to a good program. You all got some soup, I hope. And that's I was just telling this gentleman, I give these to my children each Christmas for Christmas presents because they don't seem to ever have enough money to have preparation food. So they get one of these with a ribbon on it. But you can buy them at Costco. If you watch the sales, they're between $60 and $70. There's 275 soups, and you get to try them when you go home. And it stays 20 years if you keep them cool, and cool being below 70 degrees. And so all of my children get these, and they're slowly building a collection of buckets of food. But I think it's really a good idea, and for $60, you can't beat it. So anyway, that comes from Costco. I don't get a commission, but it's a pretty cool setup. There's a lot of other dehydrated food companies too that are out there. This is the next thing you need, and you need a lot of it because it's also an emergency medical kit. This is really good for Band-Aid material, especially if we have a lot of broken windows and we have an earthquake, somebody is really cut up badly, you need a lot of this. You need this for first, its primary purpose, but its secondary purpose is it makes really good 100-mile-an-hour tape bandages. You know, can really, and really this stops the bleeding really good. If you just keep cramming it in a cut, it'll stop bleeding. So those are two items that are really simple to do, but people forget they need them. So now later on, and of course, a first aid medical kit. You can get these from $3 to $3,000, depending on your needs and everything, but you do need a really good one. And this is one of the raffle things tonight. This is not a really good one, but it's one to remind you you need to buy a really good one. You need to invest in one. And you can get a fairly decent one for $150 in that neighborhood. So this will be a raffle item pretty quick. Another thing you need, I was trying to, somebody help me here, the electronic pulse.
I was a telephone technician, so I can help you. Okay. So you want an analog phone, and I would highly encourage any and all businesses to have one dedicated analog line, because none of the electronic systems are going to work if we get hit with an EMP. And the best line to use is your fax machine line for the businesses, because people think that they can still use the fax machine line when the power goes out, but remember that's an electronic device. So just a simple one of those.
So this hooked into the fax line?
Yeah, because most of the faxes are coming in as an analog line. And so if you have a phone system in your business, it's a system and it goes through a series of being turned into an electronic issue.
Something I didn't know. I know that we get the minimum line, no long distance on it anymore. Why would anybody pay long distance charges? You know? But we wanted our line. We wanted our copper line, a physical copper line. So we have one at a minimum. But I didn't realize the fax line would work.
Yeah, and at some point the city might designate a few places throughout the city that can be accessible for people to plug in, and just have, I don't know, a certain crew of people knowing where those are,
Have you ever seen one of these? I'm not being facetious and I'm not being smart, but you know, it's just going to be too many generators. Too many years, and people are going to go, what is that? What would you do with that? You can't put it in your pocket, you know? Yes?
Why is the analog line worth after EMP when other devices do not?
Okay, it is coming out of what's called the dial. It's coming out of what's called the dial central office, which is what pushes all of the lines out, and every dial central office has a complete battery bank for backup, and they will work. It's been tested over and over again.
Yeah, and see, almost everything nowadays has a chip in it, which is basically a computer chip. And what did we call that? The electronic pulse?
Electronic magnetic pulse.
Yeah. Generator or bomb or whatever, you know.
Well, the phone systems are computer run and everything. I mean, it used to be Bell headquarters. So,
That's where the battery backup comes in.
I mean, electronically, they're all computer run now.
Well, and you know, that's kind of one of the scariest thoughts, because we can kind of know what will happen with a big earthquake. Things will go down, power lines will go down and everything. This may not work, but it's a backup system to the one we do have, which is our cell phones.
Well,
So-
if it's EMP, the cell phones won't work.
Right, but I'm saying, you always want redundancy. You want one or two systems, and actually, then it'd be nice to have a third system, which is citizen band radio, and then maybe even, you know, something even more elaborate. But you want at least 2 or 3 backup systems. So this is one, and you can put this in your closet right now and have the line sitting there and not use it, because most of us don't use them anymore.
We were in the Primaloma earthquake in California, in San Francisco, when everything fell down. And I remember I tried to call friends with that. There was no line. There was also another problem. The lines, if there is a earth line or something like that, it will be used first by the emergency vehicle and stuff like that. So for the first night, I remember we could not call anything. We were in the complete dark in San Francisco. I can talk about that after, because we didn't starve, trust me.
Well, I'd like to hear the stories, and then when you come up here, please take one of these. If you don't take anything else up here, this one from the Red Cross is the best. It's 3 easy-to-follow plans and a calendar, and you can do your whole plan right from this. You know, of course, you can get more elaborate, and you'll probably want to be more elaborate and back and fill some of these things, but those are very good, and so are these. And don't forget your pet. You know, a lot of us are going, well, I've got everything covered, except for Fido or Maggie or, you know. And, you know, now I'm looking at a few of you, you're non-petter, non-petter person. He's going, yeah, right, a pet. But it's very important to make sure you prepare for your pets, too. And this little pamphlet helps you do that. And it's from FEMA, so there's quite a few things there. Free lunch, we're going to have the drawing. Oh, yes, water. We're lucky up here we have water. And normally, a lot of our power outages are in the winter, and we have lots of water in the winter usually. So you need some barrels, some clean barrels, or some clean 30-gallon garbage cans that you can get anywhere with lids. Put them under your downspouts, collect water, and then put them, either boil it, which is what you want to do with these dry foods, but you can also buy a zero water filter like this that does the same thing as boiling. So in a pinch, you can filter your water through this. And this is $32 at Walmart or anywhere, or Fred Meyer's. So I recommend that you get one of these and put it in your closet, in your back spare bedroom, wherever you have, along with 2 or 3 barrels of food or buckets of food, and the other things, and forget about them. They're just there. And then when the emergency rises, then you can take it out and it's ready to go. So this, we're gonna have a drawing for this today too. But like I said, you can get it any store. And if you watch, you can get it for less than $30. And so I guess that's my spiel for right now. For, like I said, $30 for this and $60 for the bucket of food. Toilet paper, as much as you can get You can get a lot of it in Walmart, you know, big, but, you know, and 100-mile-an-hour tape, batteries and flashlights. And you've got an emergency kit started. Not the best in the world, but it's better than not having one at all. So I want to introduce you to a very important person in any emergency, and it happens to be Port Orchard's police chief. So, Chief Marti.
Thanks. Hello.
Okay.
I just wanted to say a few words. Obviously, we do, as a police department, cooperate with the Department of Emergency Management, which is over in Bremerton, and it's a very good organization. We, as a police department, as all police departments and fire departments across the country, are part of the NIMS system, which is National Incident Management System, which came into effect after 9/11. And then basically it was to across the board have our responses be uniform, and so everybody understands the basic way to run emergency operations, and we do train for that. But just the basic fundamentals are, and the things that you should know is that in a massive emergency situation, such as an earthquake, if it was to happen here, the priority is to save life, obviously. And the limited number of police officers that are available, and fire personnel and emergency personnel, that's going to be their priority. Then the next is serious injury, probably after that, or serious fires or devastation. But that's going to come down the line. So when you talk about preparedness, and this carries through in a lot of different areas, you really have to think about your own well-being and what you need to do to be prepared in case. And so you look at what are the fundamental things that everybody is going to need. They're going to need water, they're going to need food, and they're going to need shelter. Those are always the three basic things. You can go a long time without food. You can't go a long time without water. So that's one of the things you really need to think about. The shelter issue, even if there's massive devastation, I imagine there's going to be some place to shelter. Even if it's a massively damaged building, you know, you're going to be able to survive until something else comes about. I hope everybody read the Port Orchard Independent on Friday. There was an article in there where I was quoted extensively about school violence and active shooter, active violence in the schools, which carries over to businesses. And if you did read that article, you would have seen that one of the main points that I made was that the people in that situation have to take care of themselves first. They can't rely on the police department or somebody else for the first few minutes. It's just not possible. And so how to be able to react in an emergency takes pre-planning. You have to pre-plan, and you have to have things available that you think you're going to need, even if you never need them. And so if you can take care of yourselves for the first segment of whatever emergency is occurring, then help will come later on, eventually. So the pre-planning, and another thing I'd like to mention is think about where you are most of the time. Some people are at their homes most of the time. If you're retired or whatever, you spend a lot of time in your house. That's where a majority of the things you should have should be located. If you're one of those people that's still working, maybe you commute to Seattle area or someplace else and you spend a lot of time in your car, even something as simple as a snowstorm, and I know they don't happen much here, but I do recall one time I was supposed to fly out of town, and I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I-5 was a parking lot. And if you think about that, and if you've ever been in that situation, it's scary. You know, your car's running, but what if you run out of gas? And all of a sudden you don't have any heat, and you're stuck in that car. And some of those people were stuck in their cars for a long time. You should have something in the trunk of your car. You know, some blankets, some basic needs, some protein bars or something just to sustain you until, you know, that's taken care of. those are the main points that I would make. For any emergency, you have to think ahead, think about what your needs are, make sure you have some things available. And the mayor brought up some very good ideas, for injury or, the what are essentially MREs, meals ready to eat by the military. I used to eat those all the time when I went backpacking. And I'll tell you what, when you're hungry, they're pretty darn good. And the other thing about those are when they make them for the military, they're packed full of calories. And if you eat one of those, you're going to be sustained for quite some time. So they go a lot further for your body than what ordinary food would. So they're a good thing to have around. And like the mayor said, they're pretty much non-perishable. So it's just something easy. You can throw some in there. We have some stashed away in this building for the people that are going to be working in the Emergency Operations Center if in case we had to activate it. So I'd be open to any questions if you had any questions. Yes?
In our neighborhood, we have an emergency preparedness group, but we also have natural gas. And even though we're all prepared, how far away do we have to get if there's like a main break or something like that? If you're away from the smell of it, are you far enough away?
I would say no, because your senses are going to pick up the smell originally, and then when you're moving away, if it gets lesser, you may not notice that it's still there, if you can understand what I'm saying. On any type of natural gas break, something like that, I can't give you the actual distance that you should be away, but if it was me, it'd be a long, long ways away. The fire department's really pretty good about those issues. When this happened actually on Sydney, about a block from where I live, some truck was in park and it came across by the tattoo parlor and hit a gas main there or a gas valve or something. I could hear it from where I was, and I left. So I'm no fool. So.
We have something similar happen. It's like 3 doors down. I could smell it right away.
And that's something you should report right away because, natural gas is a major problem and you can see the devastation. I think it was someplace in California that had almost an entire neighborhood go up. So that shows you how dangerous that can be. Anybody else? Yes?
Mentioning that you have the food here in the building, I've often wondered why we don't have our businesses be required to have, like what the schools do, the emergency shed out back that you have to send your children in with, 4 days worth of food or something like that?
Well, you'd have to, if you were going to force somebody to do anything, basically you'd have to enact some type of law.
Right, and I realize it could get really sticky, and even if you can't do it by businesses, maybe if the city, and of course this would be a tax, or something can put some, deployed containers around the city and...
The city does a lot to prepare for disasters. Like I mentioned, we support and operate an emergency operations center here at the city. We train for that. We make sure our personnel are trained. We do different training with the Department of Emergency Management, like I said, are very excellent. And the other thing, too, about the Department of Emergency Management in Bremerton is they have a civilian training that you can tap into. So if you get on the internet or you call them and ask them about, what can I do to help prepare, they're more than willing to help out. And they do a great deal on that.
Chief, talking about the natural gas, we live, I believe we got these in San Diego when we lived down there, but they're about this long, and they have the notch in the end of it that fits over your gas, your gas meter. Yeah. And we have that hanging up fairly close to where the gas meter is. Would that be, have you ever heard of that, or is that something that either the city could recommend to the gas company to?
Is it a monitor?
No, it's a piece of metal. It's a quarter, about an 1/8 to 3/16 thick.
And it was from a gas company in California.
Is it turning off?
Yeah. They turn. Basically, it's a foot long, has the notch in it, and it shuts the gas off. if there was an earthquake or something like that. And that, do we have in our budget, Mayor, anything for emergency preparedness, or could you or the chief contact the gas company and ask them if there's a program?
We can check on it, but I don't think there's anything
Not call.
in the budget right now.
Those wrenches are, I think, about $3
Okay.
at Lowe's or Ace.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I'm familiar with, used to be on a SWAT team in Lincoln, and we used to have a tool that we used to use, and I was familiar with the use of that, and it's fairly inexpensive.
Easy to make too. Yeah.
Yeah, and that sounds like a great idea. And if
Yeah, that pressure wind looks great too.
you gotta be careful, just don't be pounding it on the pipe.
Any other questions?
You know, we've talked about food and water and all that kind of stuff. After 3 days to a week, if it's a very extended emergency, could you address personal safety issues?
Yeah, that is an issue. And if things are really, really bad, you know, you do have to be responsible for your own safety in much regard. And that's something that every individual has to think about for themselves. You know, you talk about gun ownership and things like that. I don't really have an opinion on that, and I really won't give one. Some people are comfortable owning guns, and some people aren't, and that's fine. But I think everybody should make their own individual decisions on what they need to do to make sure that they can take care of their own family. And it's just like anything else. You think ahead. What do I need? How do I do it? What should I have? If I have this, do I know how to use things? And things like that. So, yeah, that is a big issue because, you know, you've seen it across the country when there's some kind of chaos going on, it becomes very difficult to maintain control because people's primal needs come out, and some people decide, look, you know, I'm not going to go without. And I'm not talking about the TVs and stuff. I'm talking about other things. But no, absolutely. It's one of those things you have to think about. Yes.
I think one of the things that's interesting is that we don't get a real good grasp of how quickly something like that can happen and that not being prepared. This was several years ago. One of the gals that I worked with does a food kitchen, and it was like May, and we had this funky little snow show up one morning, and she went out before the Costco was down here, went up to Silverdale, and when she got to Costco 11 in the morning, there was not one single gallon of the 2-gallon milks left. And she said, you know, you absolutely knew in an hour the roads were gonna, I mean, it wasn't even traveling, but that just was a kind of picture image of how quickly people panic. And for everybody that's prepared, that's one less person panicking out there. Because for our emergency services, like you said, the priority is not whether you and I have water. The priority is out there. And then the other was that back in that point in time, I did contact FEMA and got some of their emergency management. They actually recommend that you be prepared for up to 3 months. And that was probably 5 years ago when I got that book. It used to be 3 weeks.
One thing I would say about that is that goes back to being prepared, because, you know, when the power used to go out downtown here, I think it's first year I was here, went out like 6 times in a year, and I'm like, what's going on? And I realized everybody had the gas generators, and apparently not everybody, because they sold out every time, you know, the power was off for very long. But that just shows you that, you know, all of a sudden those needs come to the forefront. And for the people that don't have those things, they're going to go out and get them and hoard them, take them, whatever. So you just a little forethought. It's just like in anything else. If you just have a little forethought, just do a few simple things for yourself. Think about what you're going to need. Everybody's going to be much better off. There was a question here. Yes.
There was something that is always recommended. It's to have a contact outside the area. To call whenever to call somebody. You've got that?
Yep, automatic contact cards.
Okay.
Very good idea. I'm glad you mentioned that. I
Because
wouldn't have
it's
thought
so
about
important to have somebody that instead of blocking all the lines here, because they will need it. They will need all the lines. The other thing, when we were in the earthquake in San Francisco, all the power went down. And I can tell, I know there's been some catastrophic areas where the people went wild. We were living with a couple of other French students in the worst area of San Francisco. And with no power, no nothing, no security in the buildings, no way to contact anybody, and we were asked to immediately go down and sleep in the lobby downstairs because those buildings were old and they didn't want us to go back in the buildings in case they would fall down. And I can tell you there was no looting, and there was an incredible solidarity between the people. And something that happened if an earthquake happened, the restaurants, the first thing that they will do is empty their freezer. And they will have to serve all the food, and that's what happened in San Francisco. And so that's one of the things. So when you are talking about the school or stuff like that, I'm pretty sure they will do the same thing. They will empty their freezer and distribute it because it's going to go to waste. Waste.
Yeah.
So those were something else too. It was unbelievable how fast everything came back to normal. That Bay Bridge, when it collapsed, it was cutting San Francisco from Oakland in 1 month. It was repaired. And when I saw that, I said, I'm staying in this country.
Yeah.
One of these electronic pulse weapons, it won't come back that fast.
No, I know.
It can be a long time.
I think.
One of the things where
I think.
communication came back at that moment.
I think the main point here is your world that you're in right now can change drastically very quickly. And almost everybody in this room has been in a situation where you're like, well, this is kind of bad. And maybe it gets a little bit worse. I was stuck in the snow when I was a kid with my mom in a car, and we were there for 4 or 5 hours, and it was cold. There was so much wind, the snow had blown into the engine compartment and had packed it, and so the engine stopped. And, we were freezing, and we were only a couple miles from home, but, it's frightening. It's very frightening. So something as simple as that, a little few things in the trunk of the car, being a little more well prepared would have made a huge difference. So it's always better to think ahead, do those few basic things that you need, and at least you're going to be ahead of the curve when something does happen. So that's what I would encourage.
Chief, I appreciate your comment about your car. If you spend a lot of time in your car, the beauty of that is, whatever you do as far as blankets, toilet paper, flashlights, in your car, where's your car when you're at home? It's right there with you. So you've prepared twice. You still got it in the car, but you know where the car's at. It's with you when you're at home. So,
It's also the reminder of keeping your gas tank half full or more. Don't let it run empty because...
They sound like my wife. She'll look at mine and she'll go, "You let your tank go down to a quarter." And I says, "Watch it. It'll go down to an eighth and maybe a 16th before I buy."
Yeah, cash, because no ATM is going to work.
Having a little bit of cash. Oh.
You have such
Thank
a
you.
tiny voice, you have to use it.
I do. Oh, such a deal. I'll work on that.
Okay.
I just wanted to share that the county, like Chief Martai was saying, is really a huge help. And they have come in and met with our neighborhood and enabled us to kind of set up a triage system if we need it, and depending on who's there. But they are just an excellent resource.
Susan did that for me.
Susan May. Yeah.
Susan May. This is one of the things I wanted to let you know. If you would take the time, I'll give you another soup if you'll take the time to write your contact information. And what you'll be saying here is, I want a 3-hour class that goes into a lot more depth about what to do for emergency preparedness. So if you, Oh, okay. So if you would be willing to come to that class, then I'll set it up. And I told Susan that I wouldn't call her unless we had like 18 to 20 people, because it takes her a long time to mobilize and bring all her gear. It's not fair to have them do that for less than 20 or so. But yes, let me give you the mic.
You really think this voice can't carry?
I'm not sure.
Goodness me. A couple of things. First of all, the same line as half your tank of gas being full, you should always keep your pet food at half or more, because you're not going to store pet food for a disaster. I will tell you that, because it will not hold its freshness and the animals are going to be stressed out as it is. It's just better to grab the bag and go. You should have your to-go. I love the barrel thing, because I was teaching emergency preparedness for pets, and we always use the Home Depot barrels like that, putting in the toys, the medication list, the veterinarian information, everything you could possibly need except for the food, because that's the last thing you're going to do is get food. So don't let it go past that half mark. The second thing is the program you're talking about is a 3-hour program.
The one we're hoping to have is.
Oh, okay. I have gone through Southern California a 2-weekend program, including triage, including cribbing buildings to come up, all the fun stuff, and forming teams. And that, I don't know if your county offers that type of program at all, putting out fires. It was quite extensive, but when you're done, they gave you this backpack that was full with everything that's always been in my car ever since. So I've got my to-go pack ready to go at all times.
That's, we do have that in this county. We're a partner with Kitsap County Emergency Management. And so we do have different classes, but my thought is to start small and work up to it, So this one was just to get you talking and thinking, and then the next one is to give you more information and talk about a community group. They have little placards they put out. I'm okay, help. Everybody gets a certain fire bottle. That's one thing we didn't talk about, dry chemical fire extinguisher. And they put it outside. And that's way everybody can use that extinguisher up and down the street. It's a really good program. But it's a little more than what we could do in just an hour or so.
Speaking of fire, did you ever think about what you sleep in? All of a sudden, your house is on fire and you're trying to get out and you don't have time to go get dressed. So in our house, we have an escape route, means getting out of a window and walking on part of the roof and getting down on concrete. And all I can think about is, I don't think that would work too well with what I sleep in. But I yeah, and haven't you, maybe the chief has helped out at fires and people, if you can get blankets together, because they don't have any shoes on, they don't have any slippers on. So I try to, although it's a fighting battle, because if I need a robe, I just go grab that one, but it's a good idea to keep something you can throw on. You're not going to button up your shoes and all that kind of stuff, but I think that's part of preparedness too, is thinking about getting out of the house with clothes on during a fire.
Or an earthquake too. People want to get out fast, and they may not dress.
Oh, that's right.
Shoes, gloves, and a flashlight next to your bed help a lot.
Yes. Gloves, flashlight, and some kind of shoes. They say in an earthquake, what happens a lot of times? Glass breaks. And you're in a panic situation, you go to alert one, like my German Shepherd, that's kind of idiot dog, it's So you're going to alert one, you run across the room full of glass. You're going to need 2 rolls of toilet paper and that 100-mile-an-hour tape just to stop the bleeding, And then, what good are you? Slosh, 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 slosh. You're no good at all, so you can't help anybody either. So, yeah, those are things the chief said, just think about what you might need, and then prioritize. Those shoes are a good idea, whether it's a fire, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's anything else, whether it's just going out to check the mail. Good shoes or slippers are a good idea.
I don't like microphones. Anyway, a few years ago when I was on our church council, we had some emergency sites in the town and the county. I don't know if it's a county program, but I know First Lutheran was designated as one for the fire department to use as a center for local emergency treatment. Do you know if that program is still going, or if there's any places that could be designated as a place to go on your own if you're in need?
Yes.
Can't go here, so we got urgent care maybe.
Well, there's warming centers that are ran or at least staffed a little bit by the county, and you have to put in for them. A lot of times it's a church that puts in for them, and then the state and federal government will provide a generator in some cases, so that these warming stations will be available for people whose houses are not usable.
There's a certain stash of food that was supposed to be available too.
Now, I'm not sure about that. Let's see if the chief has that.
No, the only thing I would say is on a major earthquake type thing, which is probably going to be the most serious thing in this area, what would happen is the Emergency Operations Center working together with the county and then the region and actually federal aid would find places that weren't damaged, and then they would stock those places so that we could make them usable for emergencies. So if you want to pre-designate, say, the high school, and all of a sudden the high school's been severely damaged and it's the problem, then that doesn't work out so good. So it's fairly flexible, but those decisions get made fairly early in an emergency operations center situation, and we, through our partners, request aid first through locally, regionally, and then eventually federally. Now, granted, the federal aid would come later just because of the logistics, but there are logistics in place. You'll see across the country where now that they have the National Incident Management System in place, when they have these major problems or issues, the aid starts moving through FEMA fairly quickly. So that's the good news. But as far as ahead of time and saying, okay, if this happens, I'm going to this church, that may work, but if the church is the problem, has gas leak, whatever, that won't work. So, but that information would be put out relatively soon after a major event. Right, and there's a lot of different ways to communicate. Now, if the communications go down, even if there's postings, officers and fire personnel going out into the community, you can spread the word pretty fast. So,
our emergency management team and partner up with the county, up there, has 3 or 4 trailers, generator trailers, and they're stockpiled. And they're waiting for a spot emergency. But the key word there is not a county-wide emergency, it's a spot emergency. Say something disastrous here in Port Orchard, we'll have, the rest of the county bulking up and helping us. But if it's a big disaster, we might be able to even move that equipment over here. And then, like Chief said, they're going to triage, and the most serious injured are going to get, and like when I lived in Southworth, we never had any power all winter. We have everything. We just learned to be prepared for power outage that lasts between a week and 2 months, because we call them, they say, oh yeah, but you're on the end of the line. You're actually past the end of the line, and we'll get to you when we get to you, but we're going to do all the developments because there's a lot more bang for their bucks, a lot more people there, And I understood that, so we prepared for the worst. So that's, the very worst case scenario, if you buy a few buckets of this food, and about the 15th year, you start bringing the oldest bucket out and eat the food, and then replace it with a new bucket. So what are you out? You're not out anything, really, So, yeah, it's things, it gets kind of fun. Not fun thinking about a disaster, but fun preparing for yourself, You go, aha, I got that nailed. I was just, when we were talking here, the county just had, in the cities, just had a mock disaster, and it happened to be bad guys got a hold of a weapon in the shipyard, and they started taking it out of the shipyard, and it exploded, and it happened to be a nuke. And you've heard of nuclear weapons, you've heard of like suitcase-sized weapons. That was the scenario. It wasn't a huge explosion that tore everything up, but it polluted, it contaminated a large area. The plume was headed towards Paulsbo. And yeah, that's what I told Becky Erickson. All right for you, Now I don't mind you being number one, you think, it was a plume was headed your way. But anyway, they did a whole series of things. But, and of course they closed the bridges, they closed the highways, and they said, stay at home. And that was one of the things that I was saying. This stuff is so valuable because in a nuclear, where there's some contamination, they tell you to tape off all your windows and doors. Just run this around all your windows and doors on the inside. Stay in the house, And then another thing that does, besides medically helping you, I was going to build one of these, but you put this on, you put a strip of paper around your face, and, you can breathe for a while that way, and if you have enough toilet paper, you can get by several days. You just change the toilet paper. So, there's a million different things you can do to try to be prepared, but they don't even cost an awful lot. And but here's another thing they told us that, at emergency management, they said the biggest problem is people don't listen. They don't listen to law enforcement, and they don't listen to emergency management. Of course, sometimes their ears are shut off because their television doesn't work and their radios don't work. But you can get a little crank-up radio for $20. I was going to get one of those, and I just ran out of time. But they're really cute little radio. You wind them up, and they'll play for about a half an hour. So get one of those. Now we're pushing $100 if you buy one of those $19 radios. But still, it's cheap. It's cheap insurance.
I was going to say, though, I bought the crank-up flashlights, and they didn't last very long.
The flashlights don't. The radio does.
The radio does
We
because...
were in the car, and when we were trapped, as you said, in a snowstorm in Oregon, we didn't know where we were. I was listening to because they have the Weather Channel, 6 or 7 weather channels, short waves on the special radio. So we knew when we arrived next to Portland that we were out of it. But in Eugene, we could not move. It was terrible. And it comes just like with no warning. Absolutely right. There was something.
One of the worst things?
I learned something in this country. When I was in school, they talked to us about the wheat belt, the corn belt, the dairy belt. When I arrived in this country, I discovered that you had the hurricane belt, the earthquake belt, the volcano belt. So I've been through most of them. And when we were in Connecticut, you were talking of a nuclear disaster, and we had nuclear plants around us, in between the nuclear submarine base of Groton and the Waterford nuclear plant. The governor distributed potassium iodour pills to every people.
What is it called?
Iodine, yeah. And for everybody, in case of a nuclear problem, to protect yourself with the paranoia, stuff like that. And I still have them.
Like emergency management said, listen to the experts. Don't panic, listen to the experts. And one of the things, almost always they tell you, if your house is sound, reasonably sound, why leave it? At least until you know what's going on. You get out there on the highway, and it's going to be, who knows what you're going to find out there. How well would you like to try to live out of your car in a strange area? That's not a good plan unless you know what you're doing, or you know where you're going. Yeah.
I've got 3 quick questions. One is in the event of emergency where we lose our power and our telephone lines, what is the city's plan, or how does the city communicate with the county, the state, or federal agencies?
Okay, let me bring this right over to the chief. He's the guy with the radio.
Right. We do have a radio operator that's assigned to the city, and we have the radio equipment here where we could use that as opposed to using cell service or telephones, things like that. The good news is the Department of Emergency Management isn't that far away. You could always travel there, hopefully, through some type of route to either, if that's the worst case scenario. But we have several different ways, either through our portable radios to contact the Department of Emergency Management, through the guy that runs the radio system, the other radio system. It's like it's not CB, it's shortwave. Yeah, we got a shortwave guy that's assigned our city, and yes.
So with the shortwave radio communication, is it the current frequencies that you're using on a daily basis, or is there a different frequency that they're using to communicate with an emergency frequency?
Yeah, I'm not sure what frequency they use, but it's not a law enforcement frequency.
So it's a different one. And is that shortwave radio in the city, or is it?
Yes. Yes, it's here at the EOC. Yes. And
So you set up an EOC?
yes, absolutely. So the communications may be very difficult at the start. We're hoping that eventually, as the would progress, we'd be able to communicate a little bit better. You know, the initial thing, you really just don't know. And so you have to assess what your situation is at the start and figure it out. But when we activate the EOC, all the shortwave operators that go to the other EOCs in this region, you know, become operational. And that's kind of the last ditch effort if everything else fails. Otherwise, we'd have to basically do a courier type thing.
Are those frequencies public information?
I have no idea. I'm not a shortwave guy. And our shortwave guy, when I talk to him, I don't really understand what he's talking about.
Okay, next question is, how does the city communicate with the public? Is there a citizens communication checkpoint, a posted area that the city has designated?
Well, for the police department on emergency situations, you know, we do have some protocols in place to communicate if we're going to try to get word out. That is a hard thing to do. It depends on what mediums are open to you. I mean, if the radios are, you know, if we can get word through radios, you know, the news stations, that type of thing, you know, we're going to try that avenue. Now, obviously, not everybody in the city is going to be able to receive that, or probably wouldn't be able to receive it, but that's one of the first things that we would do. Then there'd be postings at City Hall as well. And then last case scenario is, you know, we'll go out in the neighborhoods because we do what we call a survey of the damage and that type of thing, you know, after an incident, so that we can prioritize. And if we had to, we could use the PAs in the car and start spreading it by word of mouth. So you have to keep all your options open. There's no cookie cutter approach to anything. I mean, I could say, yeah, we got a plan for this and we got a plan for that. What we have is a kind of a general plan. And then as the situation would develop, we will mold our system so that we can be the most effective. And so that's what we do. But we've thought about all these issues, and Department of Emergency Management also has thought about these issues. And there are plans in place in case of a worst case scenario where we'll get the word out. Obviously, if it's a very bad situation, it's going to be tough. It will be. And we roll right back into the need for people to understand in a lot of different situations, you know, in the initial phase of any kind of disaster or any kind of incident, they have to be responsible for themselves. We all have to work together. We can't just say, okay, I need those emergency guys to come save me, because that's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. I mean, if you're in a life life and death situation, you're going to be at the top of the list. But if you're not in that situation, you're not going to be at the top of the list. So that's why we always roll back to, you need to understand, have that forethought that, hey, for a while, I'm going to be responsible for myself, and I'm going to be responsible for my family, and I'm going to do what it takes to keep us safe until we get some help. Help will come. Sometimes it will take some time. That's the best thing I can say.
We have an order, and it's mayors, women, children. Because it's funny I say that, but I'm the person that signs things for emergencies. So I will be with the chief, but he will be probably primarily in contact with them over there on the hill in Bremerton. He will tell me, we need to do this now. And that's what I do, because they're the ones trained for it. And it's not easy to take orders, but at those points, you need to let the people that are in charge give you the order.
And one other thing I'd say is you have to understand that, a lot of these earthquakes, and that's kind of my primary concern here, because I've felt them a couple times since I've been here. I'm from Nebraska. I never felt them before. My primary concern is earthquake. And the one thing that I have seen is usually you have localized damage at some point, someplace, and then it radiates out. So a major earthquake in Port Orchard may not affect Poulsbo, may not affect Silverdale area as much. So, the good thing about this area is that there are a lot of different communities in this region, and they're fairly close. Now, obviously, there's some logistical problems because of all the water and the bridges and things like that, but the resources are fairly close. And where those resources are, a lot of those places aren't going to sustain the amount of damage that the focal point of where the earthquake is. So that's the good news. I mean, we have to get through the initial phase. People take care of themselves. Help will be on the way, and I don't think it'll take that long. Do what?
Is the Navy partnering with all the local emergency services?
Yes. In fact, I go to a Chiefs meeting. I had one this morning, and the Navy and NCIS and FBI, all those groups are at those meetings. And there's usually a component where we talk about emergency management and active violence as well. They're participating with the local law enforcement, yes.
So I grew up in Colorado, and I don't know if it was just a policy there or if it's changed or what, but the National Public Radio stations were tasked with dispensing emergency information and usually it was a snow issue or a wind issue, if power was out and people were stranded. And actually, I don't think it was just Colorado, because was it 17 or 18 years ago that we had that Christmas snowstorm, and I was still in Gig Harbor then, and Peninsula High School was broadcasting all updates and information about that storm. But I don't know if this school or even the OC has a radio station. I haven't looked for it. And then just a quick answer on the shortwave, but I've been in search and rescue for many years, and it was a policy to not let civilians know what band you're on, because a lot of very graphic information can be shared, and you don't want people jumping in on the line and freaking out. So usually it's a closely guarded secret. People always find out anyway, but.
I went to, I was invited to, there's a group called Lawless Shortwave Radio Ham Operators, and they were way out in Long Branch, and they were having a weekend drill, and they said, come out if you can, and I could see it in their face. They were going, yeah, right, sure, the mayor's going to come out. I went out there and had lunch with them, and they showed me all around. They have some cool stuff, and Chief, you're right. They have this shotgun, and I think, Chief, you have seen them for throwing lines over, yeah. and they shoot this line up into trees, and within 30 minutes, they have this big high wire up about 80 feet in the air, and they're talking to people in China and all over the U.S. and everything. And they built this battery pack in the back of this two-wheel trailer out of car batteries. These guys are very ingenious, and they are, like you said, ready at any minute to go find a hill, find a place, get that antenna up, and start helping us get back to normal. It won't happen right away, like the chief says, but they'll be helping us take care of those very dangerous emergencies.
Okay, I just wanted to go along with the chief insofar as earthquakes, since I'm from Southern California, the earthquake capital. And when I decided to move up here, the first thing I did was go to the USGS, United States Geological Survey, and check out liquefaction areas, mining areas, fault areas, and of course, I now am on a home that's on an old dead fault. But at least I know I don't have to worry about liquefaction, because that is more of a concern when it comes to an earthquake than it is some of the other. Because where I was in Southern Cal, most of the earthquakes I never felt, even the bigger ones. And it was just a good, stable place. But if you went a mile from my house, it was liquefaction all the way. So check it out. That's being prepared as well, to know what type of ground you are living on so that you're prepared for that. Doesn't mean you panic and sell your house real quick. It won't happen. So.
My panic and sell it real slow?
Yeah. I sold my Southern Cal house, so that's it.
That's good. And tell us where your knowledge for animals comes from.
40 years at the Pasadena Humane Society. I wrote the emergency management system for them, as well as for their agency, and did programs for them as about pet preparedness for emergencies. And the way I bring it down, if you go camping, if you go on vacation with your pets, exactly is what you need is what you have for those events as well. It's just, it's not as fun.
You know, and people were talking about blankets. We have 3 dogs, so I don't have to worry. It's a 3-dog night. It gets cold, it's a 3-dog night, you know.
Just one real quick thing. I mentioned replace your older flashlights with the LED ones. It will sure last longer.
Okay. Do they last if you throw them down the ground? Because I do that frequently.
Probably
Better?
more stable than the others.
When we had training in Paulsbo for emergency preparedness, they told me that I wouldn't be able to get home if it were something like a major earthquake because of the sewer treatment plant. And I was wondering about, because of the chlorine that they have in their plants. And so I was wondering, is that something that we need to worry about, since our treatment plant is really quite close?
The one right down here along the water?
Well, not only that, but the big one at Retzel. I mean, if it were a major.
Not a lot of chlorine there at any one time. I mean, there's some chlorine tanks, but like 300 gallons, 400 gallons, I think. And they're injected very small amounts, you know.
Well, just, if an earthquake and one that, broke or.
Yeah, well, I think probably there would be
They
some
told me
cleanup for a spill.
I would be a person that would have to stay, because I probably would not be able to get home.
No, you can't go until we have the raffle. No more leaving, sorry. Yeah. Bossy, too bossy.
I worked at Keyport for a lot of years, 37 years.
Uh-huh.
We've all been there. We've all been through disasters.
Right.
And you can figure this, about 90% of people aren't ready. It took me 11 hours to get from Keyport to, 7 miles to get from Keyport to my home. That was one of those things where I had a lot of gas, I kept my chainsaw in the truck, I did all that. But there's going to be times when that'll happen, and there'll be people ahead of you that run out of gas, they run out of dishes because it was icy, and I'm just talking about a normal winter, abnormal winter, but still a winter. So, I mean, I had a 4x4 little truck. You just do what you can to do the best you can, and be prepared to have something in the car to eat and drink, and then get home. But it's just going to be that way, and then the sheep was correct. We have an earthquake, a huge earthquake here, and we've all been through earthquakes in this area. I'm from Shelton, so I know we've had earthquakes in Shelton and all kinds of stuff. We haven't had that big one though. And so you have to be ready. I mean, it's gonna happen, and services and people helping and chief, and you, and they're.
You're not speaking into that. Did you draw the first reference to the EV? And this is for the purifier, water filter.
You need that for the dogs.
245458.
Take my word for it, that's the right number.
All right. That's the right number, 458. Okay, now the medical, very large medical. You drew a good one. You can draw another one for us.
Two, 4, 5, 4, 5, 2.
That's Elise's number.
All right, let's see. No, you can't have my 100-mile-an-hour tape. That old phone you probably wouldn't want. Oh, by the way, these phones, you can usually get them at Sally Shop, Salvation Army, thrift shops, $3, $4, $5. I bet you 99 and 9/10% of them work just fine. They just, people just didn't want them anymore, It's kind of like those big, ugly, heavy television sets. You can get 100 of those for free. Let's see, did I have anything else? Everybody needs to get their food, their free lunches, and the papers and the handouts. Mm-hmm. Okay.
In the event of a major power outage, do we know how long our public sewer system will work for? Since we're all on sewer in
Boy,
this
I wish Public Works was here, but I'll tell you, they have a generator down there. So as long as their fuel runs, I think they'll be able to run the plant. And if you're on a gravity feed system, you're good to go. However, there's not all of us are on gravity feed. There's a lot of them that are on pump and lift stations, and those will stop. And I'm not sure I think the new one up there by Cedar, that has a generator and a propane gas tank included with it, so it'll keep pumping for a while. So I think you'll be all right. Water, I don't know how long that'll work.
One day, they might have a chuckle.
Well, you need to talk to here because you're such a...
Anyway, several years ago, and about probably 15, this will give you a little chuckle. I thought it was funny. We lost power. Of course, everything's electric, right? We got power. Everything's electric in our house. That's before I got the generator. So we didn't have bathroom facilities, so I made an outhouse. I built an outhouse out of a garden shed. But all the magazines and all that stuff for everybody, also for my wife and her daughter could use it. And I also had a view. You opened the door. It was well ventilated. But unfortunately, they didn't want to use it. I was the only one. So anyway, I thought that was kind of clever.
Well, no, you can use those buckets and put a garbage bag in there and a toilet seat on top of it. I've done that many times.
Yeah, actually, they make a seat that fits on a 5-gallon can, and it has a bag, and that's Now we don't have to go yet. It's just 8 or going for 8. We can stay till 8, 9, whatever. That's it. She's done. Had it with us. She's bailing. The radiation emergency is something that might happen here, because like whoever said that they lived around a lot of reactors. Actually, you live around more reactors in the Pacific Northwest than anywhere in the world, because there's a whole bunch of them. 4 in some of the older carriers, 2 in the newer carriers, and all those submarines have each have one. We're lucky that the Navy is the #1 safest group that ever was in charge of nuclear reactions. So we're lucky for that. They really have a safety program, but you never can tell about some kind of a explosion that might goof things up. But like they said, the first thing they told everybody, stay home. Tape off your windows and doors. Don't go outside. And get your radio cranked up, and we'll give you instructions. Don't get out there on the roads, because we're not going to let you cross the bridge anyway. And everybody will be out there on the road, and they'll all be stopped dead. And so you don't want to be one of those people. I always like to think about when we have the one snowstorm that we knew we were going to have and nobody believed it, and you see all these cars stopped in the middle of the roads, or when all the streetlights stop. Don't be one of those people that sit there for 2 hours looking at a streetlight that's dark and you know, not go through the intersection. But there is some folks that do that. They didn't think, what will I do when the light won't tell me to do something, you know? And that's what whoever said, I was prepared, but I couldn't go anywhere because of all the people that weren't prepared. So, and also the chief needs to get somewhere, you know, so don't go out there and stop and do nothing. Let the chief get where he needs to get.
I've heard you say a couple times we're going to shut the bridges down. Is that a standard operating procedure during an emergency to shut the two bridges down?
Earthquake, they'll immediately close the bridge until we can get a washout and inspect it. Yeah. That's a standard operating procedure for the earthquake. And not necessarily some of these smaller bridges, but it should be. But that could take a week or two. So
if you're in Tacoma and you want to get home, you better go through Shelton if there's been an earthquake.
You better hope that there's no accidents, because it doesn't take much to block that lane.
We had the boats everywhere. The Coast Guard auxiliaries were moving people and all that stuff during the year.
Another thing Chief said is important for you to remember, in an isolated case, Bainbridge, he'll call Bainbridge, they'll come to come to help us. So will Paulsbo. So will Bremerton. And then vice versa. If it's something in Bremerton, they'll call us. In fact, we go there quite frequently, send officers from here. And we have a really great relationship with the county, too. So, yeah, in isolated cases, we're not going to be in bad shape at all. We're ready for it. It's just the big disasters.
I think the thing is that if every single one of us in this room is prepared, that's 10 families, 30 people that nobody has to worry about. And if we can get 1 or 2 neighbors or 1 or 2 family members to do the same, if this county, if even 25% of it, I would doubt if it's even 10, is prepared to take care of themselves and their family for 14 days, that's a good length of time for the real emergency part to pass, because we don't have I mean, we live in a county of bridges, and the food sources come from outside of this area. They come out of the Federal Way, and the first place people are going to go is stores, and they're going to strip them clean. And if you don't need to go out, you're one less problem out there. And so I think that's just, you know, what do each one of us do to get one other person we know? Just say, hey, you know, if you're ready for 14 days and you never need it, that's the best thing in the world that can happen to you. You know, so thanks for doing this.
And, you know, and there's always a neighbor that needs help. So once you're prepared for that 14 or 20 or 30 days, do it again, because you can help that neighbor that you know probably won't do it for themselves.
On another scale, if you belong to any clubs, women's clubs, Kiwanis, Optimists, Rotary, you name it, get someone in to speak on the subject. That is something as well. So that's a good resource to have. Your churches as well.
That's
Right. The program where your community does this is really good, because it shows how strong you can be with a community, a cul-de-sac, you know, 20, 30 homes. When you're all work together, you have 30 fire extinguishers. So if you have 2 houses on fire, you have 15 for each house. You know, and you didn't have to buy 15. They have a procedure. They set them all out on their front porch or out on right by their mailbox, and anybody could use them. And it's just a really good, you know, procedure. Plus, it makes, and you have a lieutenant and a captain and or whatever you want to call them, you know, that you elect. that takes more time to study more so that they know how to do it. So, you know, yeah, you're right. If we're all prepared and we're prepared and to help our neighbor, Port Orchard will do just fine, you know. Yeah.
Identifying people in our neighbors that might need help, senior, handicapped, or people with babies or something like that. I think that's what I wanted to say.
And Bainbridge Island, I was just at a Coast Guard Auxiliary meeting. They've got a volunteer flotilla group that they're trying to set up. The local park is trying to set it up so that if their bridge has to be inspected after an earthquake because it's old and hasn't been retrofitted for earthquakes, they know it's going to be down for a long time, and they're preparing for that. They're going to have boats coming from here in Port Orchard. They're going to have boats from their own island shuttling people back and forth. So they're getting ready for things like that. And those are just some of the thinking outside of the box things communities can do.
Well, you know, it's the community that can do it. That's why, you know, that's the whole thing I wanted to make sure everybody realized that it isn't necessarily up to your government to do it. It's up to each and every one of us to do it, do something.
On my street, not mine.
So, thank you. You got your suits? Yeah, and if you go on the Costco's website, go on emergency food, and they have many pages of different kinds of emergency food. And every once in a while they have sales. And then right around this time of year, they usually have these soup buckets on sale. And I need 5 more because I need to get some more for my Christmas presents for my kids. Well, not necessarily. You can divert your downspouts, collect water in a barrel. Your water heater, do you have a tanked water heater if you have to. Usually there's a little sediment in it, but you're used to that brown water, so yeah, it won't hurt you at all. You have to understand, no, we don't want to go there. But yeah, there's the hot water tank. But when an emergency happens, fill your tubs. Put a stopper. Do you even have stoppers in your tubs anymore? I went all the way around my house looking for a tub stopper. Well, stop it and fill it up right away, because you probably can get some water out of the system, and that water you can use in your toilet. So that flushing water.
Yeah, that's what you do in case of an hurricane coming, because you can
And by the way, I think the program is still in existence if you buy a low flush toilet. Do you remember if it's still? I think it is. Call City Hall and talk to, well, do you know if it is?
I honestly don't know. Probably talk to Public Works.
Public Works will know. What they do is they reimburse you up to $100, I think, on a low flush, you know, like a 1.1 gallon, whatever, flush toilet. Well, I mean, you know, that's something, and you get reimbursed by the water department for low volume flushing toilet. Okay, I'm going to keep your names until I can find 20 people that want to spend 3 hours talking about the very thing we talked about a little bit tonight. Okay. You want to put their name down there too? Or you better ask them first, huh? And if you would call City Hall and ask Rhiannon to put her name down there, or your name down there, or somebody, your friend's name, or even an acquaintance that might be interested, we'll get a group together. And so now, if there's no other emergency questions or anything, what else can we talk about?
I was wondering, I'm still quite disappointed that the council voted to go ahead with the footpath and get the, try to get the people over the water to sell their homes to the city. But I was wondering, what are to me, I almost feel like there's the federal money that they got made the decision, I guess the fear of turning it back, are there some repercussions if you take federal money and then have to stop the process because you run into some problems? What was it that kind of pushed in my mind, the city council to keep pushing forward on this, that the rules on the federal money when they accept it?
That's an excellent question. I don't know what was on their mind. I think personally, it was a hybrid plan that there was 4 plans that we knew the result would be this or that. You know, if we paid the $3,000 or $300,000 back, it'd be over with. We could do whatever we wanted. We'd have to give back the $1.5 million right away money. Then there was the other 3 options, but then they took in the hybrid, this 4th and a half option, where they took part of one and part of the other. I'm not even sure that's a workable way of doing it. We're still trying to sort it out and see if it's even, because if it's not acceptable for the federalized project, what if we bought 2 houses and then the federalized project says you can't do the go around of that other house because, you know, we've been told that they wanted all of them. So it's really a touchy situation. I don't want to add one more dollar to that $300,000 unless I know we can finish.
Well, I guess I'm just thinking that for any future acceptance of federal money, we need to know that if it gets stopped in the middle because something comes up that we're not aware of, what are the repercussions? Because I always felt that there was something in the background that was kind of pushing them forward to, I mean, why couldn't we make, to me it was the trail couldn't go any other place because that's what the federal, had been turned into the federal government. And to me, a trail could be any place. You could alternate the route, but if the federal government said you can't change your plans, and then the paying back of the money, I guess I felt there was more that we weren't privy to in the audience.
There's a good possibility of that, and it might be more than I'm privy to, too. You know, I've heard so much now that it kind of runs together sometimes, and I begin to go, oh, wait a minute, did they mean that if it's federalized, this means that, or that means this? And then, of course, we mix the state into there, too, the State Department of Transportation. So I'm still a little bit confused, more than a little bit confused, and I want us to study it and make sure that what the council passed is something we can do without adding more liability to our plate. The agreement was that they would go ahead and start to buy those properties that were willing to sell, negotiate to buy them. If somebody was not willing to sell or changed their mind and said, I don't want to sell, they would try to go around them. You know, they would, right, basically right up to their doors. And they would have to, it would be a deviated path then, and they'd have to shrink the size of it a little bit, from 14 foot to 11 foot in some places.
Just a question, is having worked in the mortgage industry for years, and I understand property negotiations are executive sessions, so you don't have to answer, but just as far as, has anybody actually looked into whether the city takes them or they remain there, that down the road, are those properties even actually financeable anymore where they are? Or will it actually come to a place where those properties are not, they're not as qualified for funding?
You know,
So,
my
yes,
worst nightmare would be that we'd buy 2 houses, say. 2 others would say, I don't want to sell now. I've changed my mind. I don't want to sell. And the federal government would say, nope, that's not the deal. We said all the houses or none of the houses.
So what I'm saying is has it actually been looked into by the city when you're sitting down and negotiating on a property purchase, the viability that if these property owners are aware, or the city is aware,
that down the road, when we all come to that place where, you know, you have to sell your house because life has said you got to move on, are those properties viably financeable, no matter whether it's now or 10 years down the road? Because to me, that's a
I don't
yeah.
think that they are financial.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I just, so, you know, when you're negotiating understanding. You have this house, but in the current condition it's in, this may or may not be the best offer that you're ever going to get. I don't. Now split that.
It might make sense to spend a couple $100 and so we're coming at it from two different ways. Kathy was a lender and I'm a real estate agent, so it might make sense for the city to spend a couple $100, hire an appraiser to go out there and say, in this condition, in this market, can these homes be financed?
Well, in answer to your question, kind of, yes, we did. We have the right-of-way agent. The right-of-way agent has looked at them and has some comp sales, but the right-of-way agent, I don't believe.
Did an appraisal?
Yes, they did an appraisal.
Did they do what?
They did appraisals for each house.
Financing. Did they do it thinking that?
No, they did an appraisal for buying the property.
Yeah, no, so they need to be looked at like, let's pretend that.
No, I don't think that was part of the contract for the appraisal for the right-of-way agent to do it. They weren't looking at that.
One of the owners has stated that they're aware of the cloud over them that prevents further financing. So that was mentioned at one of the.
But I think he was saying because the city, all of the banks or lenders, we're not going to lend because they're under the cloud of being condemned.
No, no.
But also some of them have, yeah, that was, but also several of them have put in all new cement pilings. I mean, they've spent $100,000 on making those homes.
That doesn't mean it's going to appraise. You can put $1 million in your house, and if an appraiser gets out there and something's a little hinky,
It isn't. Yeah, it isn't anything about eminent domain. It isn't. It's just the fact. It doesn't even have to be these properties. Okay, that it should have been looked into quite several years ago when this project first started getting looked at. That there should have been an awareness based on two facts: the actual appraised values based on comps out there, and then the viability of financing. Those are two just very black and white issues that are outside of anybody's personal opinions, okay? It's just business. And because having worked in the industry, every single seller wants to get the most money they possibly can for their homes, and every single buyer wants to get it for the best price they can. And that's why there are completely disinterested parties involved, such as appraisers that are using comps, and then your financial institutions that are saying, yes, here are the financing options, or these properties are no longer financed. It's just that the financing rules have changed phenomenally over the last 5 years. And properties that are over water are maybe somewhat more common in the Pacific Northwest region, but again, those are unique, could be considered unique properties. I'm just curious if the city's looked into that.
I don't think the city has. It's a good idea, because in the normal process, somebody buying that would go to a lender to get a loan. The lender would look at it and say, okay, we'll loan you so much money. It's a way to vet the value. But we're not doing that, because we have the money in hand to buy it, and we're supposed to pay prevailing, or the fair market price, which is supposed to be the appraisal. If they agree, if we have an appraisal so many days from the date or till we sign the papers, it meets all the requirements, it's a done deal, and no lender gets involved. That's it.
But because you aren't.
If they want to sell it, they
Right,
might,
but-
you know, you can inherit it also a property. You have kids, you leave it to your kids. Do they need to go to a lender or to get an appraisal? Yeah, they will get one to pay the taxes. Or the
But it's,
inheritance
no matter
tax.
what, that property, no matter what, that property is only worth a certain amount of money. You know, the fact that I want my kids to have it, those emotional things, don't change the value of
It doesn't
the
matter.
property.
If you want to pass.
And if you don't want to sell your
the
home
doghouse
because you
to
want to
your
live in it,
kids,
that's a whole
it's
other
your
issue.
right.
Okay,
I don't
agree.
know.
Yeah, good.
So when the city buys 1, 2, 4, 5, all 10 of them along the proposed path, what's the city's plan for an individual house? Demo it? Keep it?
No, because they get credits, right? For getting rid of what's the answer?
What's,
The plan is to put the trail in.
I understand that, but what's the property, what's the plan for the property? Demo it, pull the pilings?
Move it off, make it, sell it, somebody wants to move
Okay.
it.
But there's a but there too. Because there's a possibility of using one of them, they say, there might be a possibility, excuse me, of using one of them for like a lookout, or just a deck over the water. But there again, that would have to be a change to the trail. And yeah, there'd be a whole, you know, that's the part that gets a little gray and a little confusing. A lot confusing.
Any chance of moving the road off to the right a little bit?
You know, what my solution is, don't go out that way anymore. Let's finish interior of town. And then I probably won't be here when we, we get back to deciding what to do out there. That's a chicken's way out, isn't it? But it makes sense because we see a clear path, no pun intended, in the interior of town. I mean, we know where we want to go and how to get there.
Is there a reason we can't settle with that for now?
The 300,000. They don't want to spend the 300. Oh, they don't want to give $1.5 million back and 300,000.
Should have thought of that before they.
Yeah, whose brilliant idea was it to do that?
Oh, this was
Design
done
that.
4 or 5 years ago?
This was designed about,
2000.
you remember? 2000, 5 years ago.
8 years ago? And people talked with the property owner at that time?
No, there was an engineering study done that laid the path out, but there was none of this groundwork that was done. That was not in the contract that the council authorized to go get that. All they wanted to do was lay out the path. That was it. None of this other stuff.
How we would
was
actually
in
get
it.
the path there wasn't considered.
That
Why
wasn't
it's
considered.
different.
Yeah, it's just like or Annex and Bethel corridor. The expenses of that corridor were not considered during the annexation process.
Because I remember when we were rezone ourselves a commercial without knowing anything for a great roundabout. And so I have the feeling there is a trend in this town to go decide on areas, okay, we're going to do that, and then it fall on your head without any warning, and then you've got to fight back. That's the stuff. So my question is still this one: who's next?
Well, if you,
House by house, you know.
If you look at how the goal setting, if you look at how the goal setting has been done by the city, it's extremely short term. If you look at the bottom of any council agenda, you'll see 2014 goals. You might see a few 2015 goals. What you will not see is 5-year goals and 10-year goals. Now, some of them, the counter that you're going to hear is that, well, that's in the transportation improvement plan, and that's in some of the stormwater and some of the water plans. Okay, that's great. But when you look at on a year-to-year basis or every 2 years when those plans are renewed, all the goals are, all that happens to the goals is they're just recycled. It's the same goals, and it's been the same goals for the 19 and a half years we've lived here. I mean, you get some of them done, but there is not a long-term plan for the city that sets our goals. And this waterfront plan, it should have had all of that stuff in it. We shouldn't even be wasting our time talking about these houses. That should have been in that plan, how it's paid for, and the timeline that we should have done it. And here we are, we're wasting our time, not necessarily tonight, but the council's spent hours and hours of discussions on where this path is supposed to be done. We spent about $280,000 on a plan, and the only thing we've gotten for it is the first 3 phases down here to where it ends down here. And that's it. The whole thing should have been laid out and basically how it's all funded. And here we are, probably wasting a bunch of time talking with property owners. That's it, I'm done.
How do you really feel, though?
Yeah.
There's a here. I just want to make a planning comment. You do have to plan, but you also have to be like the chief said. You have to wait and see what the scenario evolves.
You prepare for the worst, and you prepare for the future.
So, but also that 5 and 10 year plan. By the time you get to 8 years, it doesn't even look like what you planned for. And it will not. I'm afraid, Gil, to tell you, an 8 year plan won't meet muster from what you thought 8 years ago till the 8th year. And therefore, that's why you can overdo the planning something fierce.
Bethel corridor, the city annex Bethel corridor, what, 5 years ago? Yeah, 5 years ago. And we can't even figure out how to patch the potholes in it. And it's not your fault at all. Some people would blame you for that, and that's not the fault.
They hold properties on Tremont and look where we are.
Well, that happened 6 years ago.
You know, my dog actually fell out of a car going over one of those potholes. My big Newfoundland popped right out of the car.
Did he cause another one?
Planning's good.
Yeah,
but you can wear a lot of folks out with planning, and then never get anything done. And what bothers me is whenever we go to do one of these sections, at least 33% of that goes for more planning and engineering, and nothing's on. It aggravates me because nothing gets done on the ground until the last 60% of the money is
So the
spent.
city needs, what, $750,000 to pave the Bethel-Lund intersection? And
700,000 is what the plan is.
Planning for that, putting the money away.
Well, now here's a good point. That at least is now we're talking about segments. It's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and that makes sense. Now, of course, I don't agree with the fact that that's the worst part about it. I think over there by Safeway and Walmart and Salmonberry is worse than down at the intersection, but that's up to the council. It really is. So weigh in with the council, because it looks like they're tending to go with the intersection and trying to find the money to do it.
When the high school lets out, Bethel is backed up to a couple times damn near to the roundabout.
You guys take some cookies with you?
Yeah, Donna made them today.
Yeah, there's fresh cookies today. Take some cookies with you.
Okay.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm sorry about your pup. Did the door come open or did you just go out the window?
I don't know what he was doing. He was in the back seat, this is in my PT Cruiser, not the Suburban. And I didn't see how deep the pothole was, and did that, and then he bounced up and somehow he rolled out of the side window.
He's a Newfoundland.
Big.
Well, I heard the Newfoundland.
Yeah.
Big boy.
And it's,
He's not really huge.
No, but if your window is open, half of his body can be outside.
Well, and I didn't realize what was happening. I kind of heard them scratching on the door, and I thought, oh no, that did not just happen. And I looked just to see him running across Bethel, so he was scared to death. I just stopped the car, went running after him, doing this to other cars, and I thought, I'm going to cause a major accident.
He's a big, fuzzy guy, big, hairy guy, so probably his air safety.
Yeah, more than likely.
Chief, thank you for being here. And any other comments? It's your chance. There's no, we didn't have this on once today.
We forgot to say it at the city council, but we want to thank you to represent our town. We want to thank you to represent our town at the Armistice Day celebration, or whatever, Veterans Day you call that, up in Silverdale. And that was great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd like to also thank you for always listening to the people. And I think that a lot of these problems and planning and a lot of these issues wouldn't have ever come about had they talked to the people that these plans actually impact. You know, they have environmental impact statements that they do for every project. Why don't they have an impact statement for the public, the citizens who come before the council and try to tell them, and they're just not listening? It's like talking to a wax museum. So.
And now they want to restrain our time, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
We want, gosh.
Well, I'm not going for that. I mean, it's pretty restrained now, I think.
It's
yeah.
too restrained.
Yeah.
One of those days I think we should.
Chief, thanks again. Appreciate it. Oh, and one last thing. The dog lovers around here, the chief and his department solved the problem with the vicious dog attacks out there. Yeah.
Oh, I do have a question for the chief. During the last council meeting, they had mentioned that they need to have some kind of, somebody should approach the police and find out this area that we wanted to make that, that park where it's access for everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
And they were saying that it's, and where is it at? Where's it located?
Lumberg.
It's in Lumberg. And they were saying that there was a lot of crime out in that area, and they said that we should get a hold of the police and find out what the police think about this before they would move ahead and try to improve the park. And for me, that was ridiculous because, yes, the park is always going to, that park area is always going to have crime and stuff if nobody's doing anything there. But if you have people that come to a park and they're frequenting a park, then the crime goes down because you have eyes. And it's like where my wife comes from, the City of Lights. Paris is a very safe area because there's always somebody out there.
There's always different issues within the city depending on where you're at. And in this city, they fluctuate from time to time. I wouldn't say that we've got a predominantly bad area of town. I think the bad things change as other things occur. Different people come into a neighborhood, that type of thing, and it kind of, there's an ebb and flow there. There's no area in this town where I don't think the police department could make a serious difference if there was an issue, and I'm not aware of any issue right now where we're predominantly have a bad area. But we can respond to any, even if we did have a bad area, and if I said there was a bad area and the city wanted to put a park there, we could fix that. We can fix almost anything.
Thank you very much, because I know when I used to have a dog, I was always in the big park downtown, Jackson. And we were, and that was before they did the nice area for the kids or whatever. We were 5, 6, 7 people with a bunch of dogs, and just that kick people out. If they were doing something they don't like to see, especially if you have a big dog with you or whatever, they don't like that. So I think they're again putting the cart before their horses.
Well, I've been hearing that there are people that are camping up there in that park, and that there's a lot of drug traffic going on, but that's out of the city, isn't it? Jackson and Lynn.
Jackson Park is out of the city.
Yeah.
But when things become known to the citizens where there's a specific problem, there are things police departments can do to fix those problems. And even within my department, we do special projects where we impact things that a lot of police departments don't. And we track those projects, we track our progress, and we document them. And our police department does, I think, around 30 to 40 projects a year.
So is this something that would be considered a project, helping clean that up?
Sure, it depends.
If it rises to the level that
Well-
needs a cleaning, I don't agree with them that said that there was a lot of.
This coming from dog people who said that they stopped going there. I personally don't go
That's
there. 'cause-
Lundberg, or that's-
No, Jackson and Lund.
Well,
Yeah,
the
and
chief would have
that's
to talk
in
to the
county.
sheriff.
That's the
Yeah,
county.
yeah.
But any park, anything within the city limits, if there's an issue and the police department becomes aware of it and we believe there's an issue, there are things we can do.
We need to know about it if there
Yeah,
is an issue.
that's
And we'll
exactly
take action to,
That's
thank
the-
you.
That's the word at the dog park now, is that people are coming back to Long Lake because it's gotten too dicey to take their,
Well, that's too bad.
yeah.
I was hoping to get that off-leash area, but I want to do what they call a bark in the park too, and that's where I deputize owners and their dogs. Really don't deputize them. I mean, I ask them to call these numbers if they see anything out of the ordinary, and then walk away, get away. But I don't expect them to make arrests. But I do want them to have the number and be there day and night to see what's going on in the parks. If they see somebody with a can of spray paint, you can pretty much sure they're not going to be painting the tires on their bike, or whatever. So they're going to be tagging something. So call the police. Our guys can do wonders if they know something's going on. They need to know about it, though.
Who would they go to since it's not?
Jackson and Lund, they wouldn't, unless they be asked.
The sheriff.
The sheriff could ask them to check it out, and they'd go.
But if
But
we called and said we think somebody, it would have to be sent to.
well, that's why we'd have the Bark in the Park card would have a park, and the number you call, and another park and the number you'd call, and so you'd know, depending on which park you were at, which number you should call.
Wasn't it supposed to be 911 for everything?
It is, yes, it is, but I kind of, the chief and I have been talking, yeah.
We'll keep working on it.
So,
About the parks, just that question about the safety in that one general area, that tended to stop them about talking about those parks. Is there a park commission? Is there a group of people that are trying to move these parks forward and get these parks made up?
not in the city.
They wouldn't.
We tried to do that.
Yeah.
A year and a half or two ago.
It came up, and for some reason, they don't want a park commission. They put it down.
They don't want to hear from citizens again.
This is the first place I've lived that didn't have a Parks and Recreation department. And
No, we have a Parks and Recreation department, there's one guy. He's a supervisor, and he's the whole crew. But I mean, this city is running really lean. I guarantee it's running lean compared to any city its size.
Yeah, but I'd be willing to volunteer along with a bunch of other people.
That's what we were saying. We had a dozen volunteers that wanted to help for free. Just get involved and say what they would like to see. Those guys up there said no. They didn't want it.
At least.
They said no because they were afraid they would be told something.
Yeah, they would have to serve the citizens that they elected them in the first place.
I've seen it time and again where, especially when it comes to volunteerism, the staff is very hesitant because they're afraid for their own jobs and everything else. There is a way in creating a network between staff and volunteers that works out well. And you have to find a good volunteer coordinator who understands that. And it's building those bridges so that it's no longer, oh, those are those nuisance volunteer citizens. It's like, oh gosh, they're so good to be here. They'll do this for me and I can get this stuff done and it's amazing. It's the way you approach things more than anything else, and it's very hard against, quote, an establishment. But I've seen it go from, for example, my agency had 16 employees. We are over 100, and we have over 500 volunteers now. So it's doable.
Thanks. That's encouraging. And I think a Parks District or Parks Citizens Park Group would be so wonderful to have here. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just new here, just getting introduced.
That's all right. We were all just new here when we got here. So, well, and you know, on our, you know, before you go, be sure and take one of these disaster packets. And you may have seen it before, but it's good advice. And I'll keep handing them out, and I'll keep trying to get people on our list so that we can have a larger, bigger, more in-depth planning meeting. So,
Thank you.
yes, thank you for being here. And take some chocolate chip cookies, because if you don't take them,